The lights went out first, not all at once, but in a wave, section by section, like something was walking through the power grid and turning off every eye that could see it. I was leaning against a pillar near gate 11, half asleep, on a shift that paid barely enough to keep my rented room warm, when the alarms started screaming. I did not know her name yet. I only knew that a woman in a long silver coat was running down the concourse with 3 armed guards trying to keep pace, and that all 3 of those guards were dead before they reached the escalator. I want to be clear about something. I was not a hero that night. I was tired, underpaid, and mostly interested in staying alive until my shift ended. But when a body drops in front of you, gasping, dying, and asking with its final breath for you to catch someone falling behind it, you stop thinking about your shift. The guards had been cut down by something fast and precise, a weapon that left no smoke and no sound, just clean lines across armor that should have stopped anything short of a starship cannon. Whoever had done this was not some hired thug. This was surgical. This was expensive. The woman in silver stumbled into me, and I caught her before she hit the floor. Up close, she did not look like royalty. She looked like someone who had been running for her life for longer than any person should have to. Her eyes were pale gold, wide with fear, but steady. Whatever she was not panicking. She was calculating. "Guardian," she said, breathless, gripping my arm with more strength than her thin frame suggested. "I choose you as guardian." I laughed. I actually laughed, right there in the middle of a station under attack, because I thought she meant something simple, like she wanted me to walk her to security. Instead, her hand flashed toward my chest, and a small device, no bigger than a coin, pressed itself against my sternum. It burned, just for a second, like a brand made of light instead of metal. "What did you just do to me?" I asked, stumbling back. "I bound you," she said. "You are Ethan Cole. You are now my guardian, under the old law of my house. I am sorry. There was no time to ask properly. I did not know yet what those words would cost me, or what they would give me. I only knew that somewhere behind her, in the dark, something was still hunting. Her name was Kaya Vesserine, heir to one of the ruling houses of the Ascendancy, a coalition of powerful species that had, until 3 years earlier, considered humanity too primitive to be worth a formal greeting. We had been given a seat at the edge of their council only because we had proven, through blood and stubbornness during the border conflicts, that we would not simply disappear when threatened. Kaya's house held influence over trade routes that fed half the settled galaxy. That kind of power made enemies, and apparently one of those enemies had decided that the safest way to remove her was to remove her permanently, before she could inherit anything at all. Under Ascendancy law, when a noble heir's personal guard is compromised, they may invoke something called the right of choosing. In that moment, whoever they touch becomes bound to them by an old technology called the ward seal, a link that ties 2 lives together until the threat against the ward is resolved, or until one of them dies. It is meant to be used to choose the fiercest warrior available. It is not meant to be used on a tired human station worker holding a mop. Every guard, soldier, and trained killer in that concourse had turned to stare at us when she said the word guardian. I felt their disbelief before I understood the reason for it. To them, choosing a human for this role was like choosing a child to guard a vault. Several of the surviving elite guards actually stepped back, embarrassed on her behalf, as if she had made a mistake too foolish to correct. I did not know the full weight of the insult being handed to me. I only knew that whatever had killed 3 trained soldiers in under 10 seconds was still somewhere close, and now, apparently, it was my problem. "We need to move," I said. She looked at me with something between confusion and desperate hope. "You will help me." It was not a question, but I answered anyway. I don't know what I just agreed to, but yes. We ran. The station's lower corridors were built for cargo transport, tight metal walkways stacked 3 levels high, full of shipping containers and blind corners. It was the kind of place where an ambush could come from anywhere, and I hated every second of moving through it. But it was also the kind of place I understood. I had spent 2 years in the Colonial Guard before an injury sent me home with a small pension and no direction. I knew how to move through tight, ugly spaces where the enemy has every advantage of surprise. The first attacker came from above, dropping silently between 2 containers, aiming a weapon that hummed instead of clicked. I did not think. My body remembered training I thought I had lost years ago, and I threw Kaya sideways into a gap between crates as the beam sliced through the space where she had been standing. The attacker was tall, wrapped in a dark environmental suit that hid every feature except 2 black lenses where eyes should have been. Whatever species it was, it moved like something built for exactly this purpose. Calm, efficient, without hesitation. It should have killed me in the next 2 seconds. Instead, it hesitated, just slightly, the way a professional does when something does not match its expectations. I was not supposed to be fast. I was not supposed to already be inside its reach, driving my elbow into the side of its helmet hard enough to crack the material. It stumbled back, more surprised than hurt, and fired again. I twisted away, feeling the heat of the beam pass close enough to singe my sleeve, and grabbed a length of loose cargo strap from a nearby container. It sounds foolish, using a strap against a weapon like that, but foolish only matters if it fails, and it did not fail. I looped it around the weapon's barrel and yanked hard, pulling the attacker's aim wide, just long enough for me to close the distance and put them down with a strike to the throat. They dropped, gasping, weapons skittering across the floor. I did not kill them. I did not need to. I needed them stopped, and stopped they were. Kaya stared at me from the gap between the crates, eyes wide, chest heaving. "You fought a trained operative of the Hollow Hand with a shipping strap," she said, as if she could not decide whether to be impressed or horrified. "I fought someone trying to kill you with whatever was nearby," I said. "Who are the Hollow Hand?" "Assassins," she said, "the best in known space. They do not fail contracts. They just did." She looked at the fallen attacker, then back at me, something shifting behind her golden eyes. It was not gratitude exactly. It was closer to recognition, like she had expected this outcome all along and was only now allowing herself to believe it. "You do not understand what you have just done," she said quietly. "You have embarrassed one of the most feared guilds in the galaxy. They will not stop now. They will only send more." "Then we should probably keep moving," I said, and pulled her back toward the exit before the second attacker, the one I could already hear approaching from the far end of the corridor, arrived to test his luck as well. We made it to a maintenance lift and rode it up in tense silence, both of us listening for footsteps that never quite caught up. When the doors opened onto a quiet observation deck overlooking the docking bays, Kaya finally let herself breathe. "Why did you choose me?" I asked. It had been sitting in my chest since the moment her device burned against my skin. There were dozens of trained guards in that concourse, soldiers, people built for exactly this. She was quiet for a moment, watching the ships drift below us through the viewport, their running lights blinking slow and steady against the black. "I have studied your species since we were given a seat at the council," she said. "Your history is short compared to ours, but it is loud. You do not have the longest wars, or the largest armies, or the strongest bodies, and yet every time someone underestimates you, they lose. Not because you are stronger, because you refuse to stop, even when stopping would be reasonable. That is either the nicest or the strangest compliment I have ever received." "I meant it as both," she said, and for the first time, something like a smile touched the corner of her mouth. "When my guards fell, I had only a moment to choose. I saw you standing there, ordinary, unarmed, tired, and I thought, this one will not stop either. I did not have an answer for that. I only knew that the burn mark on my chest had already begun to feel less like an injury and more like a promise, one I had not asked to make, but one I found myself unwilling to break." Below us, in the dark between the ships, I could see shapes moving that should not have been there, patient and unhurried, the way predators move when they believe the hunt is already over. They were wrong, but it would take blood, and time, and more surprises than either of us expected, before they understood exactly how wrong they were. For now, I simply took Kaya's arm, guided her away from the viewport, and told her the only thing I could offer with any certainty. "Whatever this ward seal means," I said, "and whatever it costs me, I am not letting them finish what they started tonight." She nodded once, and together we disappeared back into the station's shifting shadows, two unlikely allies, bound by an old law and a burning mark neither of us fully understood, walking straight toward whatever came next. The mark on my chest did not fade. If anything, over the next few hours, it grew warmer whenever Kaya was afraid, a strange pulse that I felt before I understood what it meant. We had found a narrow maintenance room near the station's old fuel depot, forgotten by most of the current staff, and it was there that she finally explained what she had done to me. "The ward seal is old," she said, sitting on an overturned crate, her silver coat torn at the shoulder from our earlier run through the cargo corridors. "Older than my house, older than most records the Ascendancy keeps. It was designed centuries ago, when noble heirs feared betrayal from their own bloodlines as much as from outside enemies. The seal binds guardian and ward together, not just in duty, but in feeling." "Feeling," I repeated. "You mean I can feel what you feel? Fear, pain, urgency. Not thoughts, not memories, only the sharpest edges of what the other is experiencing. It is meant to ensure that a guardian can never truly ignore their charge, even at great distance." She looked at the floor. "It is also meant to be chosen carefully, after negotiation, after study, after both parties agree. I did not have that luxury. So we are stuck like this. Until the threat against me is fully resolved, yes, there is no shortcut. The seal does not release early, not even if I wished it. My house's enemies wanted me dead before I could claim my inheritance. Killing my guards was meant to leave me undefended in the final moment. Instead, I chose you, and now the entire arrangement has become something none of them planned for." I rubbed at the mark through my shirt, feeling its faint warmth pulse in time with something that was not quite my own heartbeat. "Why does that make it worse for them?" "Because the hollow hand prides itself on precision," she said. "They accept contracts they are certain to complete. A failed contract damages their reputation more than losing the payment ever could. You embarrassed one of their operatives in front of me, the target herself. They will not walk away from that quietly. They will see it as a debt that must be repaid, not just for the contract, but for their pride." "Wonderful," I muttered. "So instead of one group of assassins wanting you dead, we now have a group of assassins who also want to prove a point." "Essentially, yes. I should have been more frightened than I was. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was the strange calm that settled into me whenever I stopped to actually think through a problem, instead of only reacting to it. Either way, I found myself asking a question that mattered more than my own fear. Who hired them? Who wants you dead badly enough to pay the best assassins in known space?" Her jaw tightened. "I have suspicions. My house controls trade access to 3 major shipping lanes. There are rival houses who would benefit greatly if that access passed to someone easier to influence. I cannot prove anything yet, but I intend to." "After we survive the night," I said. "After we survive the night," she agreed. We did not get long to rest. A soft chime sounded from a data pad she wore at her wrist, and her expression shifted from careful calm to something closer to alarm. "They have posted a bounty update," she said, reading quickly. "The hollow hand rarely does this. It means they are not sending a single operative anymore. They are sending a full team, and they have raised the reward for anyone who eliminates the Guardian first." "Me first," I said. "You first," she confirmed. "They believe removing you will be simple, and that with you gone, I will be undefended again." There was something almost insulting in how casually the message treated me, as if I were an obstacle to be cleared before the real target could be reached. I found that I did not appreciate being underestimated twice in one night. "Then we make sure they regret sending anyone at all," I said. Kaya studied me for a long moment, and something in her posture shifted, less like a frightened noble and more like someone recalculating the odds in her favor for the first time since this all began. "You sound very certain for someone who was mopping floors a few hours ago." "I was a soldier before I mopped floors," I said. "Colonial Guard, Border Defense. I left after an injury, not because I lost the will for it. Turns out that particular skill does not fully disappear, even when you spend 2 years pretending it has." "That may be the only fortunate thing to happen tonight," she said quietly. We moved again soon after, because staying in one place for too long was its own kind of danger. Kaya knew the station's official layout, its docking schedules, its security patrols, all the polished surface details a diplomat would be expected to know. I knew the layers underneath that surface, the maintenance shafts, the cargo overflow routes, the places where tired workers like me had learned to hide from supervisors during slow shifts. Between the two of us, we built a picture of the station that neither of us could have drawn alone. The first team found us near the old recycling processors, 3 operatives moving with the same eerie precision as the one from before, spreading out to box us in from separate angles. I felt Kaya's fear spike through the seal an instant before I saw them, a strange early warning that gave me just enough time to pull her behind a bank of rusted machinery. 3, I whispered. "They will try to separate us. Do not let them isolate you." "What do we do?" "We use the ground," I said. "This place is a maze if you know it. It becomes a trap if you do not." I led her through gaps between machines, barely wide enough for a single body, forcing our pursuers to funnel into narrow paths where their numbers meant nothing. The first operative who found us paid for the mistake of moving too quickly through a blind corner, meeting a length of pipe I had pulled free minutes earlier, swung with enough force to end the fight before it truly began. The second was more careful, circling wide, trying to use the open space near the processing vats to their advantage. I let them think they had it, drawing them further from Kaya, further from support, until they realized too late that the floor near the vats was slick with runoff fluid, exactly the kind of detail only someone who had worked that floor would remember. A single well-timed shove sent them sliding into a support strut hard enough to end their pursuit for the night. The third was smarter than the first two, and far more patient. This one did not chase. This one waited, using the seal itself against us, somehow. I felt a strange pull through the mark on my chest, as if something were trying to trace the connection between Kaya and me, using it as a beacon rather than a warning. "They can sense the seal," Kaya said, eyes wide with sudden understanding. "The hollow hand studies old technology. They may have found a way to track its signature." "Then we stopped standing still long enough for them to lock onto it," I said, and pulled her into motion again, weaving through corridors with no clear pattern, changing direction often enough that any tracking attempt would only produce confusion instead of certainty. It worked, for a while, but patience is a weapon too, and the third operative eventually cornered us near a service airlock, weapon raised, expression unreadable behind a dark visor. "The human dies first," the voice said, flat and mechanical through a translator. "As instructed." I stepped forward, placing myself fully between Kaya and the weapon, feeling the mark on my chest burn hotter than it had all night, as if it approved of the choice even before I had fully made it. "You are welcome to try," I said. What happened next surprised even me. The operative fired, a clean shot meant to end things quickly, and I twisted aside, using a technique I had not used since my last deployment, letting the beam pass close enough to burn a line across my sleeve rather than my body. Before they could adjust their aim, I closed the distance, using the airlock controls behind them as leverage, slamming a fist into the release mechanism at exactly the moment I shoved the attacker backward. The outer door hissed open just enough to vent a burst of pressurized air, not enough to endanger the station, but more than enough to throw the operative off balance and send their weapons skittering from their grip. I did not hesitate. I could not afford to. A final strike ended the confrontation, and the corridor fell silent, except for our own ragged breathing. Kaya stared at me, chest heaving, eyes wide, with something that had shifted entirely from fear into something closer to awe. 3 operatives, she said. In under an hour. They were not expecting resistance, I said. That was their first mistake. And their second. I allowed myself the smallest, tired smile, assuming there would not be a fourth. Somewhere deeper in the station, alarms were beginning to sound again, this time not from the assassins, but from station security, finally catching up to the chaos we had left behind us. Kaya's datapad chimed once more, and her expression darkened as she read the newest message. "They are recalling the remaining team," she said slowly. "Regrouping. This is not over. It has only just begun." I looked at the mark on my chest, still warm, still pulsing faintly, in time with her own heartbeat, through whatever ancient technology now bound us together, and felt something settle inside me that had nothing to do with fear. "Good," I said. "Let them come. I would rather finish this properly than spend the rest of my life running." Kaya studied me for a long moment, then nodded, some quiet decision forming behind her golden eyes. "Then we do not run any further tonight," she said. "We prepare, because if the Hollow Hand intends to send everything they have, we will need every advantage we can find, and I believe I finally understand why I chose you after all." We did not have the luxury of hiding for long. Station security would soon flood every corridor searching for the cause of the alarms, and while their presence might have offered protection in theory, Kaya was certain it would only complicate matters further. "My house has enemies within the council itself," she explained, as we moved toward the station's old observation ring, a quieter section, rarely used since a newer deck had been built above it. "If security detains us for questioning, it delays my ability to reach my home fleet, and delay is exactly what whoever hired the Hollow Hand wants. Every hour I remain vulnerable is an hour closer to my formal inheritance ceremony being disrupted entirely. So we cannot rely on help," I said. "Not from station authority, not yet." The observation ring was a wide, curved corridor lined with reinforced viewports, offering a clear view of the ships docked below and the open field of stars beyond them. It was also, conveniently, a place with few blind corners and several defensible choke points, something I noted with the same instinct that had once kept me alive during border skirmishes years earlier. "This will do," I said. "If they want to finish this here, they will have to come through narrow points, and narrow points favor us." "Us," Kaya repeated, testing the word as if she had not expected to hear it applied to herself in this context. "You continue to speak as though I am capable of standing beside you rather than merely being protected. Are you not?" She hesitated, then reached beneath the torn collar of her coat and withdrew a slim baton no longer than her forearm, its surface etched with faint markings that pulsed softly when her fingers closed around it. "I was trained in my youth, before diplomacy became my expected path. It has been many years since I used this seriously." "Then perhaps tonight reminds you," I said. "We are both apparently full of surprises." We did not have to wait long. The Hollow Hand's remaining team arrived not as a chaotic rush, but as a slow, coordinated advance, 4 operatives moving with a discipline that told me clearly this was no longer a simple contract to them. This had become personal, a matter of professional pride, and professionals who feel embarrassed tend to become more dangerous, not less. 4, Kaya said quietly, counting the shapes emerging from the corridor shadows. 4 who already lost 3 of their own tonight, I said. "Let them remember that before they decide how confident to be." The lead operative stepped forward, taller than the others, moving with the calm authority of someone in command. Their voice, when it came through a translator device, carried none of the mechanical flatness of the earlier attackers. This one spoke with something closer to genuine irritation. "You have caused considerable inconvenience," the voice said, directed at me rather than Kaya, which told me everything about how the earlier failures had shifted their priorities. The Hollow Hand does not tolerate repeated failure. You will not survive a fourth encounter. Interesting, I said. That is exactly what the third one told me, right before failing. I felt Kaya shift beside me, baton raised, her earlier fear replaced by something steadier, something closer to resolve. The seal between us pulsed gently, no longer sharp with panic, but calm, almost synchronized, as though whatever ancient technology bound us together had begun to settle into its intended purpose at last. The fight that followed was unlike the earlier skirmishes. These operatives moved as a unit, covering each other's approach, using coordinated strikes meant to divide our attention and separate us by force. I understood immediately that surviving this encounter would require more than instinct alone. It would require exactly the kind of quiet, patient strategy that had defined every human conflict I had ever studied or lived through. I directed us toward the narrowest section of the ring, forcing the 4 attackers to funnel into a corridor barely wide enough for 2 of them to stand shoulder to shoulder. It was a small advantage, but small advantages, stacked carefully, are often the difference between survival and failure. The first operative to close the distance met Kaya's baton with a speed that surprised even me. Whatever training she had received years earlier had clearly not faded as much as she believed, and a precise strike to the wrist sent the attacker's weapon clattering to the floor before I finished the exchange with a final blow. "You fight well," I said, genuinely impressed. "I fight adequately," she corrected, though the faintest note of pride slipped into her voice, despite the danger surrounding us. The second and third operatives came together, clearly intending to overwhelm me, while their commander held back, observing, calculating. I recognized the tactic immediately, the same kind of controlled aggression I had faced during border conflicts, meant to exhaust an opponent through relentless pressure rather than a single decisive strike. I let them believe it was working. I allowed myself to appear slower than I truly was, drawing them deeper into the narrow corridor, closer to a maintenance panel I had noticed earlier, one connected to an emergency vent system rarely used outside of true station emergencies. When the moment came, I triggered it deliberately, releasing a brief but disorienting burst of pressurized steam meant for cooling systems rather than combat, but effective nonetheless against opponents unfamiliar with the station's internal architecture. The confusion brought exactly the opening I needed. 2 precise strikes, delivered while their coordination faltered, ended the second and third threats within moments of each other. Only the commander remained, standing calmly amid the chaos, seemingly unbothered by the loss of 3 more of their team. "You continue to exceed expectations," the voice said, almost thoughtful now, rather than threatening. "Perhaps I underestimated the resourcefulness of your species." "Perhaps," I said, breathing hard but steady. "Or perhaps you underestimated exactly how much a person is willing to do for someone they have chosen to protect." The commander studied me for a long moment, then turned their attention briefly toward Kaya, who stood resolute despite the exhaustion clearly weighing on her. "The seal between you has strengthened," the commander observed. "It grows more difficult to interfere with by the hour. Whoever designed this old technology understood something modern methods have forgotten. Loyalty freely given cannot easily be severed by force." I did not fully understand the implications of that statement in the moment, though it would matter greatly before the night ended. The commander did not attack immediately. Instead, they retreated a step, studying us both with something that felt uncomfortably close to respect. "I will report this failure honestly," they said. "The hollow hand does not often admit defeat, but tonight we admit it clearly. You have both proven more capable than anticipated." "Then this is over," Kaya said, hope flickering cautiously in her voice. "Our involvement, yes," the commander said. "But understand this. We were hired by someone with considerably more resources and considerably less patience than we possess. Our failure will not end their intention to see you removed. It will only convince them to seek methods far less controlled and far less careful than our own." With that warning delivered, the commander withdrew, disappearing into the station's shadows with the same disciplined efficiency that had marked their entire approach. I did not trust the retreat entirely, but something in their tone suggested genuine acknowledgement rather than deception. Kaya lowered her baton slowly, staring at the empty corridor where 4 skilled operatives had just been decisively defeated. "I have never witnessed anything like this," she admitted quietly. "Not from any guardian in my house's long history." "I am not from your house's history," I said. "I am something your history never accounted for." She turned to face me fully then, golden eyes searching mine with an intensity that felt entirely different from the desperate fear of hours earlier. "The commander was correct about one thing," she said. "This is not over. If the Hollow Hand has withdrawn, whoever hired them will not simply accept failure. They will escalate, and I fear their next attempt will not respect the boundaries a professional guild chooses to maintain." "Then we prepare for that as well," I said. "Whatever comes next, I do not intend to let this night be the end of either of us." Her datapad chimed again, this time carrying a message with an origin marker she recognized instantly, her expression shifting from cautious relief into something closer to genuine alarm. "This is from my home fleet," she said, reading quickly, her hands trembling slightly around the device. "They report unusual activity near the jump corridor leading toward my house's territory. Unregistered vessels, moving in formation, consistent with a private military contractor rather than any recognized peacekeeping force. Meaning? Meaning whoever hired the Hollow Hand has grown impatient enough to consider direct action," she said. "Meaning the danger tonight may only be the beginning of something far larger." I felt the weight of that realization settle over both of us, the mark on my chest pulsing steadily beneath my shirt, a quiet reminder of the bond now tying my fate to hers, whatever came next. "Then we do not wait for them to choose the timing," I said. "We move first, and we make certain that whoever believes this can still be finished quietly, understands exactly how wrong they remain." Kaya studied me for a long moment, something resolute settling behind her exhausted but steady gaze. "You continue to speak with a confidence I do not fully understand, given the scale of what remains ahead of us." "I have learned something tonight as well," I said. "Being underestimated is not always a disadvantage. Sometimes it is the only advantage a person truly needs." Together, we turned away from the quiet observation ring, the defeated remnants of the Hollow Hand's team left behind us, and moved with quiet urgency toward whatever confrontation still waited ahead, both of us now fully aware that the night's true test had only just begun. We reached the station's private docking wing just as the first traces of morning cycle lighting began brightening the corridors, a false dawn manufactured by the station's systems rather than any true sun. Kaya moved quickly toward a small diplomatic shuttle bearing her house's emblem, a vessel far less grand than I expected given her status. "It is deliberately modest," she explained, noticing my expression. "Traveling in something understated draws less attention than arriving in a vessel that announces wealth and vulnerability in equal measure. A lesson learned from experience, I assume. A lesson learned from watching relatives who did not survive long enough to learn it themselves," she said quietly, and I did not press further. Inside the shuttle, Kaya moved directly to a communications console, fingers flying across controls with practiced familiarity. "I need to contact my house directly," she said. "If unregistered vessels are truly approaching our territory, my family needs warning before any confrontation becomes unavoidable." While she worked, I found myself studying the mark on my chest again, still faintly warm, still pulsing with a rhythm that no longer felt foreign, but strangely familiar, as though my body had already begun accepting this bond as simply another part of who I now was. "The connection is stable," Kaya said, more to herself than to me, before the console's display flickered to life with a face I recognized instantly from earlier briefings she had shared during quieter moments of our escape. An older man, sharp-featured, wearing the formal deep blue robes of Vesserine leadership. "Kaya," the man said, relief evident despite his controlled expression. We received fragmented reports of an attack. Are you unharmed? I am safe, uncle, she said, thanks to unexpected assistance. The man's gaze shifted toward me, curious and evaluating. This is your chosen guardian? The human? Ethan Cole, I said simply. And yes. Something shifted in the older man's expression, surprise giving way slowly to careful reassessment. The reports mentioned a hollow hand team withdrawing after significant losses. I confess I did not believe it until this moment. Uncle, we do not have time for surprise, Kaya said firmly. Unregistered vessels are approaching our territory. This attempt on my life was not isolated. Someone intends to prevent my inheritance ceremony entirely, by any means necessary. The man's expression hardened. We suspected as long as 3 months ago that House Draven has grown increasingly desperate regarding the shipping lane negotiations. Your inheritance would finalize agreements that severely limit their expansion. If they have moved to direct action, this confirms suspicions we could not previously prove. House Draven. The name meant nothing to me yet, but the weight it carried in Kaya's expression told me everything about how seriously it should be taken. House Draven would not risk open conflict without confidence in victory, Kaya said slowly. If they have hired mercenaries beyond the Hollow Hand's professional restraint, they believe they can succeed without consequence. Then we must ensure they discover otherwise, the older man said. Return to our territory immediately. I will prepare our defenses and alert the Council of House Draven's suspected involvement, though without solid proof, formal action remains difficult. Proof, I said, an idea forming. What if we could provide exactly that? Both Kaya and her uncle turned toward me, curiosity evident in their expressions. The Hollow Hand's commander mentioned reporting their failure honestly, I said. Professional guilds maintain records, don't they? Contracts, payment origins, something that could tie this attack directly back to whoever hired them? Kaya's eyes widened slightly. Guild records are typically protected by strict confidentiality agreements. However, a failed contract, reported honestly to their leadership, might include payment details as part of formal documentation. If we could access those records, we would have exactly the proof needed to hold House Draven accountable publicly, her uncle finished, nodding slowly. A difficult task, but not impossible, particularly given how thoroughly you have already disrupted their plans tonight. Then that becomes our next objective, I said. Not simply surviving whatever comes next, but ending this permanently, with evidence undeniable enough that House Draven cannot simply try again through different methods. Kaya's uncle studied me for a long moment through the console's display, something like genuine respect finally settling into his expression. I confess, when Kaya's message first arrived, describing her chosen guardian, I feared the worst. It appears I owe you a debt I did not expect to owe a human, of all things. You owe me nothing yet, I said. Ask me again, once this is truly finished. The communication ended shortly after, plans forming quickly between Kaya and her uncle regarding both immediate safety and the longer path toward exposing House Draven's involvement. As the shuttle prepared for departure, Kaya turned to me with an expression I had not yet seen from her, something softer beneath the exhaustion and lingering tension. You continue to think several steps beyond simple survival, she said. Most guardians, even skilled ones, focus entirely on protecting their charge in the immediate moment. You are already planning how to end the threat permanently. Simple survival only delays the next attempt, I said. I would rather remove the reason for the danger entirely than spend the rest of however long this bond lasts constantly looking over our shoulders. However long the bond lasts, she repeated softly, something unreadable passing behind her golden eyes before she turned back toward the shuttle's controls without further comment. The journey toward Vesserine territory took several hours, time we spent carefully reviewing everything we knew about House Draven, their leadership, their motivations, and any potential weakness we might exploit to secure the proof we needed. Kaya proved remarkably knowledgeable regarding the political landscape, her diplomatic training clearly extending far beyond simple etiquette into genuine strategic understanding. House Draven's current leader, Administrator Corvain, built his influence through aggressive expansion of shipping contracts throughout the outer territories, she explained. My family's control over the 3 primary lanes has repeatedly blocked his efforts to dominate trade routes he considers rightfully his, based on historical claims most other houses no longer recognize as valid. So, this is about money, I said. It is always about resources. Ultimately, she said. Power in the ascendancy flows directly from control over trade, and control over trade flows directly from control over the lanes ships must travel. My inheritance ceremony finalizes agreements that would permanently limit Administrator Corvain's ability to expand further. He clearly believes eliminating me before that ceremony completes offers his only remaining path toward the dominance he desires. A desperate plan, I said, built on the assumption that removing one person solves a problem that runs far deeper than any single life. Desperation often produces exactly this kind of short-sighted violence, Kaya agreed. Administrator Corvain likely believed hiring the Hollow Hand guaranteed a quiet, deniable resolution. Instead, he has created a very public failure, and soon, hopefully, undeniable proof of his own guilt. As the shuttle approached Vesserine territory, sensors began detecting exactly the unregistered vessels her uncle had warned about earlier, a small fleet moving with clear military discipline despite lacking any official designation. They are positioning themselves along the outer perimeter, Kaya said, studying the readings carefully. Not yet engaging, but clearly prepared should any opportunity arise. Waiting for us, I said. Waiting for confirmation that their earlier attempt failed completely, she corrected. If they believed the Hollow Hand had succeeded, they would already be moving to consolidate control before my house could respond. Their hesitation confirms they know something went wrong. The mark on my chest pulsed steadily, calm, despite the tension surrounding our approach. A strange comfort that I had not expected to find in something I had not chosen for myself. Whatever waited ahead, I understood clearly now that this was no longer simply about surviving one dangerous night. This had become something larger, a confrontation between an old, patient house and a desperate rival willing to risk everything for power they believed rightfully theirs. Whatever happens next, I said quietly, we finish this properly. Not through more violence than necessary, but through proof undeniable enough that House Draven cannot simply try again. Kaya nodded, her expression steady, despite the danger clearly waiting ahead. Agreed, though I suspect Administrator Corvain will not surrender his ambitions easily, even when confronted with undeniable evidence of his own failure. Then we make certain his failure becomes impossible to ignore, I said, watching the unregistered vessels drift silently along the perimeter of Vesserine territory, patient predators awaiting confirmation of a victory that had already slipped entirely beyond their grasp. The shuttle docked at a private platform deep within Vesserine territory, a fortified compound built into the side of a rocky moon, its defenses subtle but clearly formidable to anyone who understood what to look for. Kaya's uncle met us personally at the docking bay, accompanied by a small contingent of house guards whose bearing suggested considerably more competence than the guards lost during the initial attack. "We do not have much time," he said without preamble, guiding us quickly toward a secure command chamber deep within the compound. The unregistered vessels remain positioned at the perimeter, but our scouts report additional movement, suggesting Administrator Corvain grows increasingly impatient. "Have you located any path toward the proof we discussed?" Kaya asked. "Possibly," her uncle said. "One of our intelligence contacts maintains connections within various guild networks, including remnants of the Hollow Hand's administrative structure. They report that failed contracts are typically documented thoroughly, precisely to protect the guild from accusations of incompetence rather than genuine failure. If payment records exist confirming Administrator Corvain's involvement, our contact believes they can be obtained, though not without considerable risk. What kind of risk? I asked. The records are stored within a secure facility, technically considered neutral territory, monitored jointly by several guild networks to prevent exactly this kind of retrieval, he explained. Accessing them without triggering security responses will require considerable skill and likely direct involvement from someone the guild networks would not immediately recognize as a threat. Kaya's eyes shifted toward me, understanding passing silently between us before she spoke aloud. A human would not immediately register as a significant threat to guild security protocols designed around known combatant profiles. You want me to retrieve the records personally, I said. I want to give you the choice, Kaya corrected. This task carries genuine danger, entirely separate from the protection our bond currently requires of you. I will not command you towards something beyond the scope of what you agreed to that night. I considered her words carefully, feeling the mark on my chest pulse steadily beneath my shirt, a quiet reminder of everything that had already passed between us since that first desperate moment in the station concourse. You did not choose me because you needed someone who simply follows orders, I said. You chose me because you believed I would not stop, even when stopping might be reasonable. This qualifies. Her uncle studied the exchange with quiet interest, something like genuine approval settling into his expression. Then we prepare accordingly. Our intelligence contact can arrange access, though the final retrieval must happen quickly and quietly. The plan that followed required careful coordination, Kaya's diplomatic connections providing cover identification, while her uncle's resources arranged transport toward the neutral facility housing the guild records. I would enter alone, minimizing suspicion, while Kaya coordinated remotely, monitoring security patterns through channels her family maintained, specifically for delicate situations, exactly like this one. The facility itself resembled countless other neutral way stations scattered throughout contested territories, unremarkable from the outside, heavily secured within. I moved through corridors designed to appear welcoming to legitimate traders, while subtly discouraging anyone with less honest intentions. Following directions relayed quietly through a small communication device Kaya had provided. Security rotation shifts in approximately 4 minutes, her voice said softly through the device. The records room should remain unmonitored briefly during that transition. I moved quickly, but carefully, aware that any misstep here would end far worse than the earlier confrontations aboard the station. The records room, when I finally reached it, proved smaller than expected, rows of secure data storage units humming quietly in the dim light. I need something identifying Administrator Corvain specifically, I murmured, searching quickly through labeled storage units according to guidance Kaya relayed, based on patterns her family's intelligence had already identified. Third row, lower section, she said, after a tense moment. Our contact identified irregular access patterns matching a payment transaction roughly 1 week before the attack. I found the unit exactly where she indicated, extracting a small data core carefully before securing it within a protective case designed to prevent detection during transport. The entire retrieval took less than 10 minutes, though it felt considerably longer given the weight of what depended on its success. Exiting the facility proved nearly as tense as the retrieval itself, security patterns shifting unpredictably as the rotation Kaya had identified concluded slightly earlier than anticipated. I moved quickly through a service corridor, narrowly avoiding a returning patrol, before finally reaching the transport waiting to return me toward Vesserine territory. You have it, Kaya said when I finally returned, relief evident despite her attempt at maintaining composed professionalism. I have it, I confirmed, handing over the protective case carefully. Whether it contains exactly what we need remains to be seen. Her uncle's intelligence specialists worked quickly once the data core reached their secure systems, extracting and verifying records that confirmed everything we had suspected. Administrator Corvain had indeed authorized payment to the Hollow Hand Guild, structured carefully through several intermediary accounts, but ultimately traceable directly back to House Draven's own financial networks. This is sufficient, Kaya's uncle confirmed after reviewing the evidence personally. Combined with the failed attack itself and the presence of unregistered vessels along our perimeter, we now possess undeniable proof of Administrator Corvain's direct involvement in an attempted assassination against a recognized house heir. What happens now? I asked. Now, we present this evidence formally before the full council, Kaya said, something steady and resolute settling into her expression despite the exhaustion still evident from the night's events. Administrator Corvain's ambitions end not through further violence, but through undeniable proof of his own guilt, exactly as we intended. The formal council session convened within days, held aboard a neutral station specifically designed for matters requiring judgment from across the Ascendancy's various member houses. Kaya presented the evidence herself, calm and precise, despite the gravity of the accusation, while I stood quietly beside her, fulfilling exactly the role she had chosen for me that desperate night. Administrator Corvain's expression, when confronted publicly with the payment records tracing directly back to his own house's financial networks, shifted rapidly from practiced composure into genuine alarm. His attempts at denial crumbled quickly beneath evidence too thoroughly documented to dismiss, and the council's judgment, when it finally arrived, proved swift and severe. House Draven's influence within the Ascendancy diminished significantly following the ruling. Administrator Corvain himself, stripped of authority and formally exiled from further political involvement. More importantly, Kaya's inheritance ceremony proceeded exactly as originally intended, her house's control over the vital shipping lanes finally secured without further threat of interference. In the quiet aftermath following the council's judgment, Kaya found me standing alone near a viewport overlooking the neutral station's docking bays, watching ships drift peacefully below, running lights blinking steady against the endless black beyond. "You saved far more than simply my life that night," she said, joining me quietly. "You have secured my house's future, exposed a dangerous rival's ambitions, and in doing so, changed considerably how many within the council now view your entire species." "I only did what felt necessary," I said. "I did not do it thinking about how humanity's reputation might shift as a result." "Perhaps that is precisely why it shifted so significantly," she said, something thoughtful entering her voice. "You acted not from calculated strategy regarding political advantage, but from genuine, stubborn commitment toward protecting someone you had only just met. Many across the council have taken notice of that distinction." I considered the mark still resting quietly against my chest, no longer burning with urgency, but present nonetheless, a permanent reminder of everything that had unfolded since that chaotic first night. "What happens to this now?" I asked. "The bond, I mean, the threat against you has ended. Does the seal simply release?" Kaya was quiet for a long moment, studying the ships below with an expression I could not quite read. "The seal releases automatically. Once the Guardian and Ward both formally agree the danger has passed," she said eventually. "It requires mutual acknowledgement, not simply resolution of the original threat. And if one party is not entirely certain they wish to release it." She turned to face me fully then, golden eyes searching mine with quiet intensity. "Then perhaps that party should say so honestly, rather than allowing ancient technology to decide the matter on their behalf." I understood, in that moment, exactly what she was truly asking, and found my answer arriving with far less hesitation than I expected. "I am not in any hurry to see this bond end," I said simply. "Whatever comes next, politically or otherwise, I find I would rather remain exactly where this began, standing beside you." Something eased visibly in her posture, relief and quiet happiness passing across her expression in equal measure. "Then perhaps we allow the council, and whatever remains of the galaxy's assumptions regarding your species, to continue adjusting slowly to exactly what they have already witnessed." "Let them adjust," I said. They chose to underestimate humanity long before they ever met me personally. That mistake was never truly mine to correct alone. Word of the night's events spread quickly throughout the wider ascendancy in the weeks that followed, details shifting slightly with each retelling, though the core truth remained consistent regardless of embellishment. A human, dismissed initially as an absurd, almost insulting choice for Guardian, had single-handedly defeated some of the galaxy's most feared assassins, exposed a dangerous political conspiracy, and secured the future of an entire ruling house, all within the span of a single desperate night. Other species, long accustomed to viewing humanity as a curiosity rather than a genuine consideration within galactic politics, found themselves quietly reassessing assumptions that had gone largely unchallenged since our first tentative introduction to the wider council years earlier. Diplomatic requests, specifically seeking human security consultants, began arriving with unusual frequency. Houses across various territories, suddenly curious whether the qualities demonstrated that night represented an isolated exception or something more broadly characteristic of an entire species previously dismissed too quickly. I did not concern myself much with those broader implications, though I understood their significance clearly enough. My focus remained instead on the quiet, steady partnership that had formed between Kaya and myself since that chaotic first encounter, a bond that had begun through desperate necessity but had grown, through shared danger and mutual respect, into something considerably more meaningful than either of us had initially expected. Standing beside her months later, watching her formally assume leadership over her house's considerable influence throughout the ascendancy, I found myself reflecting on everything that single choice, made in a moment of desperate fear, had ultimately set into motion. She had chosen a human as her guardian, dismissed by nearly everyone present as an almost laughable decision born from panic rather than genuine judgment. The assassins sent to exploit that supposed weakness had discovered, one costly failure after another, exactly how mistaken that assumption truly was. And somewhere across the wider galaxy, in quiet council chambers and private strategic discussions, an old assumption regarding humanity's place within the greater order of things had begun, slowly but unmistakably, to shift. They would learn, eventually, that we do not frighten easily, and that underestimating us has never once ended favorably for those who make that particular mistake. But by the time most of them fully understood this lesson, it was already far too late to matter.